Welcome, everybody, to January Climate Action Committee meeting.
Would you like me to
And-
take minutes?
Let's see, it's our first meeting of the second half of the decade. Important decade. We have 5 years to make a lot of progress. Anybody have any comments, any thing to announce of, it's been a couple months since we've been away? Things that are happening, things that are important, not political?
Yeah, I think politics has been on our minds.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, a very small thing. I'm Ted Scott. This is the first CAC meeting I've been to. Alyssa Brown and I have launched a sustainability interest group at Concord Green
great,
with the hope that we will figure out how to convert Concord Green from natural gas to electricity
fantastic.
down the road.
Welcome, Ted. Is there anybody who would like to take notes this evening?
I already volunteered,
Okay,
but you weren't hearing, so.
thank you so much, Cheryl. Our first order of business would be to approve the minutes of November and October. We went through the minutes of October. They were all cleaned up. We didn't actually vote on them. And my only comment is they look great to me. As is,
I had a minor thing or two.
okay. Gary?
I have to find it, so.
COT or?
SCOTT.
T.
Oh, sorry.
And Alyssa Brown, right?
Alyssa Brown, yes.
All right, well, I can't quite find it.
These are the printed minutes of that.
Um,
So
Well, I
it
had
was
mine marked up,
October the 28th
but thank you.
and
Yeah,
November 20th.
The one thing that was semi-material was a reference to Climate Action Advisory Board.
Is this October or November?
October.
October?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it should have said Climate Action Committee.
Okay, I didn't notice that.
Oh, I noticed that as well,
I did not notice that either.
but I didn't know there was such a thing.
Yeah, well, there used to be such a thing.
Okay,
And, I don't know if it's significant that we get this exactly right or not, but
yeah,
the reference was just a little bit off.
okay, so let's just, I'll check that and then we can submit the minutes.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah, I mean, that's
Thank you.
officially defunct now, so,
Right.
yeah, why not correct it?
okay,
You're gonna make that change?
um,
Who took the minutes that day?
what?
Who
That
took the
was
minutes?
Catherine, wasn't it?
Catherine took the minutes, and they've been revised. Does anybody want to propose that we accept them?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Second? Okay, we're gonna accept the minutes with that minor change, if it is a change to make.
So just a clarification, which minutes?
October.
Okay,
Okay, all in favor?
I was here for only a second portion, but
Okay,
for
that
that
would be
portion,
all of us. Then the November minutes that Brad took looked absolutely fine to me. I didn't see anything, except there was one
funny how that.
reference to somebody named, Chris.
Chris, I probably should have asked the
Yeah, I
group.
think that might have been Chris Schaffner,
Yeah,
who's,
on the Zoom,
yeah,
it just said Chris. And
Yeah.
then the only thing that was ever said was when he said like, dinner's ready or whatever.
okay, yeah, that's the thing about, we had a picture. But no, I think the minutes were just fine.
Yeah, they look
I think
good to me.
Chris is what he wants to be known as.
But then I-
So it's the November minutes that had to change items.
of the
No,
November.
no, I don't think so, because I did find
Oh, Brad is,
Climate Action Advisory Board in the
Yeah,
October.
that's
minutes.
it. That's not the November minutes?
That's the October minutes.
okay, well, that's
Oh.
great.
Okay, well, that is what I was looking at.
So can I just ask a general question?
Yeah.
Typically, when somebody attends a meeting, we ask them to give their address. I mean, in most meetings I've ever been to over the
Right.
years. Should we be doing that?
Oh, that's probably a good practice. Maybe we want to get in touch with them.
Well, I just mean in general, I mean, that it's true
Okay.
in town meeting, it's.
To
I have been in-
establish our bona fides.
Exactly, heaven forbid you should be from some other town, out of Concord town, right? I mean, I don't know, I don't know what is that something that we're supposed to be doing? I don't know, I don't remember.
I've seen
that
it, I've seen it as
historically,
general practice in most other committee meetings.
That's been my
So
experience. other
yeah, I don't think it
meetings,
could hurt to do it. I think
No,
it's
it-
good. That way you just have a record of,
Exactly who they are.
yeah.
If
In
we
case
get a
there's more than one
large
John Smith.
number of people, we should just pass a piece of paper around.
Yes.
Except when most of them are on there, but yes,
Oh, that's
right,
it.
yeah, no, I mean, I throw that out there for what it's worth, just from
Okay.
my past experiences, just so you know,
We
okay.
know where Ted lives, although we don't know
That's
the
right.
number.
You don't need to know the number, you just need to
Okay.
know Concord Green.
And and Ron, you have to figure out
Are
what
you-
Ron.
Hoping to join the committee or you just have something to say tonight?
No, I am hoping to join am I
Are you
am
on
I
the
a member of the
committee?
committee, Brad? I thought you invited me, but I'm,
I invited you to come,
okay.
if you're interested in becoming a member. You would submit a green card.
No, actually, I'm very happy to be a visitor.
Okay, damn, okay, let's have a
Sure.
vote on November.
It looks perfect to me.
I move that we accept the November minutes.
Well, Brad sent a update, cleaned up version,
Yeah,
um,
that's the one we're
On,
talking about.
on Google Docs today, which I looked at, and it looked just fine.
So I move that we accept the minutes.
Okay. Should we vote on that?
I'll second that, it needs a second.
Okay, all in favor of accepting the November minutes?
I,
We're all good with November? Good, get that out of the way. So our next meeting is in February. That would be, are we doing the third Monday?
In the middle
Is
of
it the-
school vacation. week.
What?
I think that might be in the middle of school vacation week.
So the third,
When's Washington's
was it
birthday?
the third or the fourth Monday that we do?
Well, the third Monday is after would be President's Day, the
Yeah.
17th.
So,
Okay, so,
I have it on the 24th.
That's
So
the
if maybe
fourth,
it's the 24th of,
Yeah,
February.
we typically do the
Fourth
fourth,
Monday?
fourth
Okay, good.
Monday,
that's
right?
a Friday.
Good plan.
Wait a minute,
the
sorry.
24th.
Looking at the wrong-
And I mean, that's what I have on my calendar, but I'd probably just put in there as a recurring. Every
20.
fourth Monday.
Fourth. And Eric will find a.
Yeah,
room that
for
makes
the
sense.
foreseeable future, I have this room reserved, first floor here.
Okay, great.
So that should be the continuing location unless something changes.
I like this room a lot. Okay, so then, we got, chair updates. Would be our next thing. All I have to report is we did the, annual meeting. The annual report. Jen and I worked on that together. It's it's a formality. There's nothing super interesting in there, but if anybody would like a copy of it, I have 2 copies. Anybody needs some reading material.
I like
Um,
electronic copy.
I also have it online and I can send you a link. That, and then we can reference it in the minutes if you
Okay.
want. It's easy to do, it's just, took
Do we approve it or?
a couple of hours, at least figuratively.
If you spend a couple hours on it, I'll take a
What?
hard copy of it.
And now don't, no comments on it because it's already been submitted.
Right.
Oh.
So then, we have kind of 2 vacancies on the committee. Because Gavin's gone and, Michael McDonald's gone. And, we'd like to fill them. Cause I think we wanna stay at 9. Does anybody know anybody, yeah, I've been reaching out to some people, anybody I happen to talk to. I invite them to, that might be good material, but anybody have any, friends or people that they're thinking about that might be good, to join the committee? And good organizational skills, might be a chair at some point, anything like that? I just want you to think about that and talk to them, get them interested. Because I did look at the names that Andrea in the townhouse had given, and most of them were really old.
Oh, yeah?
There were things from like several years ago.
Oh, that,
In that sense. I was taking that a little personal for me.
No, I mean,
That's several of us.
names that are not, they were stale. In that sense.
Yes.
Careful with that one too.
Not current, I
It
think.
was,
is-
it was somebody we both spoke to, back in summer. There was, I guess was it before Brett came on? Or
Didn't-
was it
Did he come
somebody,
to the meeting?
there was somebody, was
Yeah,
his
there
name
was some-
Ken or something?
oh, yeah, there was
Oh,
somebody
yeah,
you
there was
knew.
that
yeah.
fellow. We should get in touch with him. His name wasn't Ken, but, I'm gonna, remember who that was. Yes.
He must be in the
call
minutes.
He would be in the minutes,
The
yeah.
guy,
If he identified himself.
They're knocking on the door.
yeah, cause he
That's
was.
why we want last name,
uh,
first name,
Yeah,
fingerprints.
I tried to put the hard sell on Fran Cummings, but, he was not having it.
That's too bad. He'd be good.
Okay, so, Eric, are
Yes.
we on time now? We're even 5 minutes early.
Oh, all right. Yeah, so not sure if everybody had a chance to look at the written update I sent. There's a lot of information in there. I was really just not gonna go through that in detail for the sake of time, but I'm happy
Yeah.
to answer questions, if anybody has any questions from going through that. So I'd also submitted for the annual town report, just like Brad did on behalf of the committee, I did on behalf of sustainability. Included a few images to go along with that, that maybe will make it in there. Yeah, but mostly I'm happy to answer questions. I mean, there's a lot in here, so I wouldn't
Yeah,
really know where to start, with trying to run through a lot of it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On the energy audits,
Mhm.
you mentioned the intent is to have an RFQ drafted in a few weeks for internal review.
Yeah.
So will this committee be involved in the internal review?
Yeah. Yep, yeah, we'll be glad to share any of that with you. So I'm working with Russ, the facilities manager right now. On drafting the RFQ, and just getting the resources together. So yeah, we'd be happy to share a draft and get input from well, probably a bunch of stakeholders, but including the
Right.
committee here. Yeah, so you certainly have a chance to look at that and
so the
And let
next
us know
few
what-
weeks would be when?
hopefully by the end of next week, we would have something at least rough to
Uh,
share in terms of a RFQ.
So that would be,
Or the fourth.
Uh,
February 4th is a week from
Eric,
Friday.
it's an ignorant question, but what's the difference between an RFP and an
by,
RFQ?
Feb.
Request for proposal versus request for qualifications. There's some technical differences from a procurement standpoint in terms of what that means. My understanding with an RFQ is that, I think a request for proposal, I believe you have to go with lowest bidder, lowest qualified bidder. Request for qualifications, I believe, allows you a little bit more leeway in terms of who you select,
I
because
see.
you're basing it on qualifications and not just cost.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's, and the way the state has it set up, there's a special procurement process for energy service contracts, like what we're trying to pursue, and they have a model RFQ
Right,
that they want people to kind of follow along generally. So we're planning to go with the RFQ. Yeah.
Great.
so does when they respond to an RFQ, do they put what they would charge to do the work?
Yeah, I believe that's in there as well. But so you're trying to be thoughtful and careful about, what qualifications you're looking for based on exactly what you want included in the effort.
Yeah,
And yeah, I believe I believe that's part of it as well, is cost. So you'll have a sense of that
okay,
as well. Yeah, but yes, the committee will be happy to share a draft, for anybody who's interested in the committee to take a look at.
right.
I would imagine there's multiple committee members might want to do that.
Sure, yeah.
Good. Now, there was a meeting you suggested that was, it's all related somehow, but it's with the decarbonization, roadmap,
Yeah,
with the power options.
Yep.
And that's this week.
yeah, there's a meeting tomorrow. So I had applied for technical assistance from Department of Energy Resources for us to do a municipal decarbonization roadmap. So this is just municipal.
Yeah.
You know, which I said in my email, it's, you know, it should be a useful tool for the town, but it's also a requirement for us to pursue the climate leader certification with Green Communities Program, which is something
Yeah.
we definitely want to do. So I was notified, it was like Christmas Eve or something that we got the technical assistance. And so tomorrow will be the first meeting with Power Options, who's the vendor that Department of Energy Resources uses to do these roadmaps with municipalities. So there's a handful of other towns who are in this round of technical
Right.
assistance. And it's tomorrow's just the kickoff meeting, so it's gonna be Power Options talking to all of us in this cohort of towns. To just sort of walk us through the process, high level, let us know what's going on,
Oh,
what the
okay.
expectations are, things like that. So, you know, I'll be happy to share any of that info with anybody who's interested. You know, once I learn more tomorrow, like I said, I invited Russ, our facilities manager, to be involved in that meeting, just so he's
Yeah.
aware of what the expectations are. Since he is the one who knows the buildings best and has sort of the strongest sense of a lot of what our capital needs are moving forward.
So the technical assistance is Power Options.
Yes.
Helping us out. It's
Yeah.
not, it's in kind,
Mhm.
okay, cool.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
good.
so so that'll be underway. My understanding from talking to some others who went through the process in the first cohort was that I think it took about 6 to 8 months to complete it. So basically, they're going to be relying on us to provide them with a lot of municipal building and vehicle related data, which a lot of that's going to come from our annual Green Communities reporting through the MEI system. And then, you know, they'll work with us to develop a roadmap to get us to with the 2050 goal in mind, you know, of reaching milestones and how we do that through our municipal buildings and vehicles in terms
Yeah.
of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. So my conversations with some of the towns who, again, were in the first cohort and did it with Power Options was that there's sort of some mixed comments about what they, in terms of the usefulness of what they felt like they got out of the process. Some thought it was fairly useful, others seem to think maybe it was less useful and didn't really reflect their priorities as they had thought. I think the important thing in terms of paying attention to detail in this process is that there was a webinar last week with the Green Communities Program where they provided some information about the funding opportunities that are going to be available to the climate leaders communities. And one thing that seemed pretty clear was that if climate leader communities are applying for funding from Green Communities Program, that the decarbonization roadmaps that are being developed by these communities as part of getting their certification is really going to be used as the guiding document. So, you know, in other words, if you're saying we're going to request $500,000 from Green Communities to do a big retrofit on one of our municipal buildings, you know,
Yeah.
that needs to be identified in that decarbonization roadmap as a priority. Otherwise, you know, you're probably gonna have trouble justifying why you're picking that building versus another
Right.
building kind of thing. You know, so there's value in that, in just, you know, kind of thinking through that and making sure that, you know, our priorities and needs are represented
Yeah.
in that process. So the end of June and the end of December are the next two deadlines for applying for climate leader certification. So based on what others have told me, I'm not certain that we would have this roadmap done in order for the June deadline.
Right.
But I think we would certainly have it done for the December deadline.
Okay.
So either way, we should be able to apply for climate leaders designation or certification. They keep saying they want to use the word certification
Yeah.
this year.
Okay. Another question about green communities. You said there's an April submission and you were gonna apply for electric landscaping, which to me sounded like a tiny, greenhouse gas thing. Is that really, are there any other projects we can do?
Well, most of the funds that you would typically be pursuing are for building projects.
Right,
You know, and so. You know, building projects have been on hold for us until we, you know, do these building audits and the energy service contract and get all the building audits done like that. So, you know, I've talked to Russ about, you know, are there any opportunities? And the response I've largely gotten from him is a reluctance to commit to doing any building projects. A, because of current budget, and then B, because of just waiting to see how the priorities fall out as once we do the building audits.
right.
So he's been reluctant to commit to doing any sort of significant building efforts. I mean, I'll certainly.
Even solar, arrays or something like that, like we're
Yes.
already planning to do,
Uh,
or, we're already considering for the high school.
Yeah, that's a different can of worms, just because. You would need the full buy-in of the school and the school committee.
Yeah, I know,
So
it's
that's-
just, it would have an
yeah.
impact about 100 times bigger than the.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Uh,
No, I mean, I'd love to be pursuing like something much more significant. I think if, you know. I mean, my understanding from Public Works is that they have on their radar spending, if I remember the conversation correctly, somewhere in the ballpark of potentially up to $100,000 on battery powered landscaping equipment, like
Oh,
over the next year or two. So
okay,
I just want to have that conversation with them and see, I mean, if they're, because there's this whole process where if we do try to pursue it through green communities. You have to submit the proposal in early April, you have to wait a few months to find out the
okay,
fate of that, and then it's only then that you would be able to purchase these items. So if Public Works is telling me we can't wait till the fall to purchase this stuff, then the
Yeah.
timing doesn't make sense. But I'm exploring with them to see what the potential could be, and if there is potential. I mean, if it's for $5,000, that probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be necessarily pursuing that at this point, but.
right.
And I'll revisit it with Russ again to see if there's,
Okay.
you know, anything that's worth pursuing for that.
How
Do you
long,
know-
how long lived are some of these pieces of equipment that are being considered? Are these things that the town's gonna own for 25 years?
Probably not that long. I mean, I would imagine technologies would be evolving and,
Wear and tear.
yeah, just wear and tear on them. I mean, you know, I don't think their useful life extends more than, I mean, I can't say for sure, 5-10 years or something, you know, depending on the actual
Yeah.
equipment. And, you know, so.
My lawnmower is a lot older than that.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, you know, and it could be, it all depends. I mean, because even, I mean, if you're doing battery powered equipment, then, you know, even if the equipment itself continues to work, you're probably gonna need to be replacing batteries at some point.
Yeah.
Which is often the big expense, which is something I plan to bring up with green communities anyway, is because they have, you know, they have this funding available for battery powered equipment, but there's no specific funding for batteries.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's the biggest expense. And if you need to replace those, you know, that's a big cost, or buy spare batteries so that you have enough batteries to, you know, complete a job. You know,
Right.
if you buy the equipment and one set of batteries comes with it, then you still have to invest in additional batteries. And then there's no specific dedicated funding for those additional batteries, which again, tend to be the most expensive item.
I'm
Yeah.
just remembering the pride with which the superintendent said that they managed to get 25 years out of that dump truck of theirs. And, you know, I think there's always budget pressure to make stuff last longer.
Mhm.
So, I mean, yeah, it's, you know, it's a small thing to be chasing lawn equipment or, you know, landscaping equipment. But if it's something that's gonna be, they're gonna wring every ounce of life out of it, I want it to be electric as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Plus, doing these little things
Oh, I know.
just
I know.
kind of snowballs for the bigger stuff later. So,
But they're
Yeah, it's
also,
cool, and
you
especially
know,
if,
they've got, you know, places to maintain all over town, so they're probably using it 4 days a week.
mhm, mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, so I'm just exploring that with them now and seeing what the opportunities might be to do that. Yeah, so we'll see if it makes sense or not.
Snow plows
Based on their-
included.
Yeah.
No. Okay,
So when you said you're gonna get the school committee to agree, and you've gone until December, do you think the school committee is going to be persuaded during that time?
Are you talking about the?
With solar on top of this,
Of
on
the
top
high
of the
school.
high school?
That's something that sort of had some mixed reactions when the solar task force had put some effort into getting some momentum behind that with the schools. And that where it was left before the task force disbanded, because they only had a year to work, was that they were trying to get agreement from the schools, some type of agreement that they could get people actually up on the roof to reassess the feasibility of doing of solar up there. You know, there was some feasibility work that had been done a while ago on that, a number of years ago. That seemed to show that structurally the roof could handle solar. But I think there's been some equipment changes up there, so I think they want to get people up there just to reassess that and see what space might be available and you know, reassess the roof and all of that. And then my understanding of where it was left off was that there was things were moving too quickly with getting approval from the schools or the school committee to allow people up there to start taking a look around.
Yeah.
And then there was also, and what the task force ultimately wound up basing their recommendations on was just ground mount solar, recognizing that rooftop and canopy
right,
didn't necessarily make financial sense for CMLP in terms of an ownership model.
but there's nobody pushing forward on solar at the school now,
Not at the moment, no.
right?
Not other than the middle school and the array over there. That's, you know, everybody's trying
Yeah.
to get off the
Yeah.
ground.
The solar on the Willow School, I believe. The solar panels
yeah.
there,
Oh,
but-
the
yeah.
small one.
So, yeah, I mean, you know, we'll certainly keep looking for opportunities there. Right now, I'm having conversations with the schools, trying to see what I can do to get EV charging infrastructure for the driver's ed fleet and also at the elementary schools and get some
Yeah.
EV chargers set up over there. So they've asked me to investigate that. So I'm looking into that right now and seeing what I can do to get them some information and maybe some proposals around that. So,
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on. Next thing on the agenda, there's not that much of an update on network geothermal, other than that we haven't really met on it recently. So, and I think we need to restart that in February. So,
But I think it's worth saying that
yeah,
we went to the Framingham
right.
Network Geothermal.
We did that before the last meeting.
Oh,
Yeah, we
okay.
did talk about it, but
Okay.
that was a great, inspiring visit. I have had discussions with, a few people just to try to further my understanding and thinking about how to do it, including Ted, who's interested in, Concord Green. And a guy named Fran Cummings, who maybe many of you may know, who moved away to Acton, but then moved back to Newbury Court. And Fran, so there's Newbury Court is going to be developing about 12-acre property, an expansion, cutting down a lot of trees. But this is a plan to kind of increase their ability to house the retirement community. It's gonna be across the street, so if you know Ornac, it's across there. And this is gonna be built from scratch, so it's an ideal place to do geothermal, especially if it can connect to Newbury Court. And even more especially if it could connect to the hospital. Because that would be
For networked geothermal.
a geothermal network. That would be a really big win, although it's, of course, it is a big project. So, and Fran is, he's been in energy consulting for, his career and microgrids and stuff like that, so he kind of knows how to, think about these projects, but, I was hoping he was gonna come tonight.
Just name again? I'm sorry, his
what?
last name?
Cummings,
Cummings?
Cummings, Newbury Court. We're gonna try to figure out how to start the conversation with, the stakeholders, which are Newbury Court and National Grid and CMLP. And in the meantime, I'm gonna keep on trying to work on, understanding the economic benefits, from, the, mitigating the peaks. Because when you do geothermal, it's the most efficient system you can do. So it naturally uses less energy at the times when everybody wants to use a lot of energy. But it's also, if it's a network, it could even be controlled remotely to mitigate the peaks. And that peak, so CMLP, when you get your electric bill, you see charges on it, like how much electricity used, the energy charge. There's also a capacity charge. And there's a transmission charge, and those are all calculated based on those peaks, either an annual peak or a monthly peak. And to the extent that you can control your electricity use during those peaks, you can save. Right now, that some of those charges, about 6 million compared to the energy charge of about, I think, 12 million. So it's a sizable fraction. That should be used to incentivize doing, geothermal. If you can prove that installing so many, megawatts of geothermal saves you that amount of money, we can have to do that calculation. So,
Sorry, have you finished talking about that? You finished talking about geothermal?
yeah,
Okay.
Oh,
I want to,
before we move on to the next topic, I was just gonna opine and say, politics aside, I think there is a changing landscape in energy policy in this country, but I do think the one nice thing about geothermal is that there's promise for them to sort of double down because of what Brad was just talking about. I think there's sort of this idea that the intermittent renewable energy sources are not as reliable. They don't necessarily solve the peak issues. And because there's this ability to, mine for minerals, as well as maybe leverage existing oil and gas infrastructure and work with utilities. I guess that's all to say that I think there are massive headwinds on some of the renewable energy projects that may be coming our way, but I think that there are tailwinds on this one. And so that's maybe a silver lining in all of this. And so hopefully we can proceed. And I think any of the legislation that happened in the last few years at the state level, I don't think should be affected by anything that happens at the national level. But I don't know, but that's my understanding.
right.
Is it true, Brad, that the Novo development is going to have network geothermal?
It's gonna have geothermal. I don't think it's
Okay.
a network in the same sense,
Mhm.
although it could be. What is the timing of Novo development, you know?
I don't, I've kind of lost track of that. The last thing I've heard about that area over there was, they're actually removing part of the 300 Baker Avenue building. Like in the one front corner, they're removing a section of the building and adding parking instead, and somehow that was connected to whatever their obligations were for the Novo project and had some impacts there. But I don't know, I'm not up to date on the timeline
yes,
of the Novo
I
project.
read that there was a deadline that had been set for April 16th to get their final plans in. And they didn't know whether they were going to meet that deadline. I'm not sure why there is a deadline.
So April 16th, do you think they do their final plans?
I think they're expected to have submitted by then to I don't know.
Yeah, I can
The
try
state,
to
I
find
think,
out.
But I'm not sure.
Okay,
Yeah, I can try to find out.
okay.
I've probably been a little more engaged with the Row Hills project recently, and haven't heard as much about Noble, but.
But I wanted to ask you about the other 40B project.
Mhm.
You wrote here that they want to put in gas for backup generator or backup heat, was it backup generator for electricity or backup heat? And for
For the pool.
heating the pool.
Yeah,
Do you know if it's backup heat or just backup generator?
I think it's just generator. It's, I think they were just talking about, like emergency generation and, being able to have gas, in order to be able to do that. But my conversation, so there was a very large meeting recently of, the developers, their architects, some of their consultants, and in this room with probably staff from a lot of different town departments. And everybody was sort of providing updates, and staff had the opportunity to, provide comments, and I reiterated, that the town very much would not like to see them using fossil fuels as part of the project, because they had originally requested a waiver to the specialized code because they're not impacted by the fossil fuel free program, because that they predated that with their application. And their response to me was, oh yeah, our plans now are that we're gonna be using heat pumps for the development. And like, the exceptions are for, emergency generator, like, generators, backup generators. And then because they're gonna have a pool there, I don't think they can,
Heat pumps are ideal for a pool,
well, they
can
were,
be.
I don't know the size of the pool or what the specs were, but I think they were talking about that, but it sounded like for all the building conditioning, the 200 plus units that it was in the common spaces, that it was supposed to all be heat pumps.
I would have thought heat pumps would work for a pool, because it only takes, it's a process that is slow to heat up. I mean, you don't need a rapid heating program.
Yeah,
Heat pumps are good at slow and steady.
Yeah, well, we could ask,
Okay.
try to find out more about that in particular if you want.
so that's good
So-
news. Is it a commitment? Is that sort of what their plans are looking like now?
Yeah, they made it sound like that was what they were planning to go ahead with, and that's what they have
That's
been
the,
moving forward with.
Yeah.
that's the Thoreau.
I
Yeah.
just think the whole thing is ghastly. But it's 2 apartment blocks surrounded by a car park.
Yeah,
That's it.
well, unfortunately, I think the town is somewhat limited in terms of
I know,
what we
I
could do
know,
about
I know.
that particular development, given the 40B
It's-
status,
It's
but
just-
yeah, I mean, I was encouraged to hear that they were no longer pursuing, a waiver to the specialized code, because their waiver simply consisted of saying that they requested that they be able to use a variety of different fuels. And so the fact that they are largely electrifying or planning to electrify that development, I think is encouraging, so. But yeah, we could certainly try to find out more about, I don't know the specs of the pool, but the feedback from their team, they made it sound like it would be challenging to do that with a heat pump system
Yeah,
based on the pool or the use of the pool. I
don't know.
I heard a big time contractor saying it's less expensive to use heat pumps, because it's easier just to throw all that stuff in on these big units rather than putting in all the infrastructure. It's actually cost effective to use heat pumps for new builds.
Yeah, and I
And he
think,
was being interviewed on
Yeah.
NPR, and he was just saying nowadays it's just much more cost effective to
Yeah.
use heat pumps.
And I
New
think
construction in
New
general, you
construction.
mean.
On big units, because the guys could just throw those heat pumps in a matter, half the time they would use to put
But there
infrastructure in
could
front
be
of stuff.
considerations for pools that were.
Oh, no, I'm
out.
just saying, it doesn't surprise me, because my understanding is for new construction,
Yeah.
a bunch of units, it's
Well,
actually
when that-
much more cost effective.
when the project was first proposed to the town, I think there was some people, maybe even in this room, who went to some of the first meetings and asked, okay, well, how's this project gonna be sustainable? And they were kind of like, what? And I think it's because this particular group, I don't think it has a lot of experience with developments of this size and nature. And so, I think that them hearing the constant refrain from the town, you know, from committees and
Yeah.
departments and planning board and others that, you know, they really need to be, you know, doing their best to make this, as, you know, carbon free as possible. You know, I think that message kind of got through to a large extent, so.
I mean, the fact that it has to have air conditioning means that a heat pump is
Yeah.
doable if it's designed in.
Mhm.
Um, and, okay. Anything else?
Yeah,
Well,
hey Brett, I was
Yeah.
at I was at the
Ron.
zoning board. This is Ron Whitfield at 67 Wits End Road in Concord. Just so you can know my address, just
Yeah.
not send me hate mail. But I was at the same meeting maybe Eric was at in terms of the zoning board on Forest Ridge, because I've been following that project somewhat carefully. It is going all electric, as Eric was saying. And they're even going a little bit beyond. They're saying it's going to be passive solar for the whole buildings, all the buildings. So that's more insulation, better windows, and other things to make the buildings themselves fairly energy efficient. They hired a sustainability consultant. I think McGann Associates. I'm not familiar with them. And they are, you know, their report was actually online on the zoning board website, so you can actually get a copy of it. And if you can, I think I might have downloaded it, but the thing that they're tone deaf to is the trees and the leveling, all that beautiful landscaping behind the project. They've refused to do anything with indoor parking, although the zoning board has been asking them to consider that. So they have not really responded well to the pleading to put more parking underground, because they have to have parking for something like 400 and some, Eric probably knows the number more carefully than I do, but I think every unit, which is 237, has to have 1.88 parking spots. I don't know. That's a town requirement, I believe.
Yeah.
And that means over 400 cars have to be parked above ground. And that is means that the impervious surfaces are going to be rather large and fill up quite a lot of the landscaping on the property, which means most of the trees come down, if not all of them, and that's like 1,000 trees, and they're large, and the terrain is 40 feet in height. So from they're going to have to level all of that, remove all the topsoil, and maybe sell the trees or do something to. I mean, you don't cut down all that hardwood and burn it. You try to use it for commercial purposes, I would imagine. And so they have not made any accommodations for the climate issues of tree removal. And they don't even acknowledge that that's a problem for them. They just
Right.
are going forward with above ground parking, but they are making accommodations for the energy efficiency and of the buildings themselves. So that's the good news, and that's also the bad news, in my opinion. That's all.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question, and you know, maybe this is just for another committee or meeting, but this parking issue keeps coming up, and what I can't quite understand is whether that the developers are doing it because they have to with respect to zoning, or because that's what the demand for the units requires. Like if somebody wants to rent or buy that unit, that's how much parking that they would want. Is that sort of the market? Just because it does seem, I'm less so much the Forest Ridge, although that requires, you know, paving, you know, Paradise and putting up a parking lot, but the Baker Avenue one, which is walking distance to public transportation and already has, well, I'm not sure if I know exactly where it's going, but my understanding is there's a ton of impervious space already and lots of parking there. I guess I'm just sort of questioning whether it's necessary and what the rationale is, and if it's simply just because the town says from a zoning ordinance perspective and nothing else. Does anyone know?
Yeah, I don't know
Town
myself.
requirements.
I think there are, depending on the zoning, there are parking requirements that are in place. I feel like I've heard some conversations about revisiting those at some point. Although I don't know that that's happened, I'd have to talk to the planning department more to better understand, what those requirements are. I mean, ultimately, I think, especially if we're developing things in areas that are closer to transportation, public transportation and better options or multimodal transportation, that you would prefer not to have higher parking requirements.
Yeah,
But I can't say I know the specifics of that, but I can certainly find out more.
Yeah, I'd just be interested in that one particular, just because if there's something like, in the short term, in order to get this going, a waiver, just like the other one, where it's sort of like, we actually don't need this parking, there's plenty of parking there. I don't know the answer to this is all hypothetical, but whether, we can push on that, just because I would think it would save the developer money too, if they're not having to put as much parking too. So anyway.
right. Well, I like the idea of putting them underground, but I don't know, so then that isn't something that's done here in general.
Well, I know in some cases, I know there are with what do they call it, podium parking, is that what they call it?
That's what Novo was.
Underground, yeah, is that there are concerns from public safety, from the fire department about, being able to access, any fire or fire hazards that are in underground garages and being able to access those and put them out if there was a fire under there. And especially when it comes to electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging.
Yeah, I just gotta put some water in there.
So, but anyway, so I know there's some public safety
Yeah,
But
concerns
they,
around underground
but
parking.
they do have parking underneath the buildings, the Novo project on Baker Ave.
They did originally, I think they still do, but that may have been modified to
Okay.
reduce some of it. I think they originally were talking about like 2 levels underground, that may have been reduced to 1. But again, I have to revisit.
At least it's some, whereas this is,
So,
the Forest Route is none.
yeah,
okay. Let's move on. I had on the agenda to talk about updates to the Sustainable Concord dashboard, which Eric put on in his director's report. I spent some time trying to, updating the goals. That's important because our goals are different than they were, and updating the text to be accurate, more motivating, and updating values to be the 2022 values. Have you had any chance to talk to them about, what we tried to go online and change a couple things? It wasn't clear how to do it.
no, I'm gonna, well, I think I figured out how to do most of the text changes. There might be some other changes. I haven't done those yet, but I'm intending to look at that this week and see how much of the edits that you gave me I can get done
Okay,
this week. And then if there are things I can't, I can follow up with them. And then I do have a meeting scheduled with them, I think in 2 weeks, to do some additional training on the back end.
oh, okay,
But in the meantime, I'll try to get as many of those edits as I'm capable of done
Yeah, great.
in the next week or 2.
okay. Let's go to climate action plan. So this was our first, since in November, we decided to review different sections of the climate action plan, in particular, starting with the natural resources section. And I thought it was interesting. I'm glad we got started with it. So Eric's applied for funding to get a consultant. I've heard that funding is not necessarily, it's not guaranteed. So there's a chance that there's some pushback from the select board just because money in town is so tight. So to the extent that we may get more involved deeper in changing the plan ultimately than just assembling stuff. I don't know, you haven't heard any more about that, have you?
No, I haven't heard anything specific, so what I do know is that, you know, I put in this, a request for 75,000 for FY 26, you know, which would start in July of this year.
Yeah.
To work with a consultant to update the plan, and my understanding at this point is it's sort of, so there were a lot of capital requests that went in across all the departments, and basically between the finance department and probably the finance committee and others, all the departments have been sort of notified of what was going to be included and what wasn't. And so this was included, which I think is promising, because it's basically it's sort of past that first level of approval from,
Okay,
you know, the finance department. You know, it still needs to go through some public hearings, and, you know, there was one public hearing that happened with, I think, the select board and the finance committee a few weeks ago that I sat in on, just in case, you know, anybody brought up that particular item. But basically, the town finance director went through the main capital requests and specifically mentioned that one, and nobody posed any questions or expressed any concerns about it. So I think that's encouraging. But yeah, there's still some process to go through.
Okay.
So there's no absolute guarantee at this point. But, you know, I do know that, you know, other requests that were made from different departments for capital requests for things like vehicles and other things were, you know, they've already been told that's not gonna happen for next year.
okay,
You know, so they've already kind of done a first pass at.
okay, good.
requests. And like I said, this is, updating the climate action plan was listed as one of the select board goals,
Right,
for the year specifically. So I like to think that, you know, there may be some, you know, reservations from the select board in general, or certain members of the select board, or, you know, and I agreeing with what Brad said, you know, the town from a staff standpoint and operations standpoint, you know, there's a lot of talk about us being very, you know, fiscally responsible, if you will, in the face of increasing costs and budgets. You know, we've been, you know, asked to make level budget requests, which truly aren't really level since costs go up. But
Right.
yes, you know, but we're asking to be very thoughtful about requests. And there's a need to, you know, tighten budget strings and all that. So, you know, but because this was one of the goals of the select board, you know, I like to think that there's overall support. And, you know, as we move forward and see what the committee can do to help support this, you know, maybe it wouldn't necessarily cost $75,000. And,
right,
but, you know, I was basing that on some conversations I had and some estimates that I gotten
Right.
on what that might involve. So I'm optimistic about it, but yeah, we'll see.
so, what was, I wanted to, I thought we could just talk through each, you know, did we all work on, I can't remember, did you work on one?
I looked at water, but just from the website. I didn't talk to anybody there,
Oh,
because I
okay.
can't, I'm working when everybody else is there. I don't have any.
Right. And Jerry and Paul worked together, Janet and Brad worked together, and I worked with Catherine. How did, and so we started with a template. I put together a template, and I don't know if that template worked for anybody, necessarily. But I thought it was important to at least state the questions. What were people's general experience with, did we know what to do, what questions to ask? Sure.
I'll comment. So I found the template useful. It helped to organize my thinking going into the meeting. Once I got in the meeting, everything changed. That, and I don't say that in a
Yeah,
negative way. We had interesting discussion, and Eric was there with Paul and me. We had interesting discussions with Delia Kay and then Melissa Seaman.
Simon Sini.
Yeah, fascinating discussions, actually. And they were both very open.
Yeah.
I think the bottom line is not a whole lot's been done. Which is not to say they aren't aware or they're not planning, they are.
Yeah.
At least certainly in Delia's case. But it was, in terms of getting to a point of, say, measuring our progress,
Yeah,
that's kind of hard.
right,
Because that's a very quantitative thing, and these discussions, at least in the way I thought about it, they were mostly qualitative.
Mhm.
There were some, more quantitative comments. For example, there was one area where Delia said, we haven't done anything so far on that.
so you were working on on the,
Natural resource vulnerability.
the last one, no, this fourth one, assessing vulnerability.
Yeah.
And also, some on water
Yeah.
conservation.
Yeah, Paul's kind of led the discussion on the water stuff.
Okay,
Part because that's a natural for him, and part because I had to leave a little early.
our experience was the same thing. Once we got in the meeting, it was just, there was so much information flow. It
Yeah.
wasn't like, if we had like 4 hours, we could have stepped one at a time and gone through.
Right, so the template, on its surface is very structured. But our discussions were not structured.
Yeah,
And yeah, if we had more time on both sides, we could go through it in a more structured, methodical way. But in the end, I don't know that we needed, at least in the two cases I was involved in, I don't think we needed to go there.
right.
It was the qualitative discussions I thought were more significant. I don't know, Eric, where,
Right.
you have a
Yeah,
view, just different view?
yeah, so I sat in on 3. I mean, I don't know if did you guys meet with with staff at all, or you just?
We met together.
Oh,
we
okay,
got
okay.
up with a
Yeah, so I sat in on the one that Brad had, and then, the 2, last Friday. And yeah, I mean, that was my impression too. I think, it was largely qualitative. I think it was, but I think that was necessary, because I think the hour that we were able to spend was, I think it was useful to the staff in these departments, because, they may not necessarily looked at the plan in a while and been like, oh yeah, like I forgot about this blueprint, and I forgot like that these specific actions were in here, and maybe they were aware of them at one point or it was in the back of their head, but maybe, I think it was sort of good to be a reminder to them about the specifics. I mean, I think they know they have a role in the plan, and they're connected to the plan, but I think reminding them of some of the specifics was good. And then from my observations, it seemed like it was useful, to all of you to sort of hear from them about, sort of what was happening in their world and how it related to the items in the plan. Cause it seemed like, I know the conversation with Melissa, I think you and Paul, I know I learned a couple of things from her about, what was happening and going on. And I think you probably felt the same. It seemed like you felt the same way
Yeah.
with Delia about like, oh yeah, I wasn't really that aware of that. And
Right.
and the impact of that, or the, how that fits in. So I think it was qualitative. I think it was useful on both sides to
Right.
have that initial conversation. I don't know where, I guess I'm wondering, and that's probably what we're talking about now is, where does this lead to?
Right.
Where's it?
That's
Yeah.
what I was.
To, any more specific sort of assessment of, or more detailed assessment of, what's been done or what needs to be done.
Catherine.
Yeah, and I would just say I would echo everything that's been said, and I don't know if you all felt this way, but I felt like we almost had 2 meetings in one, because Brad and I took on 2 blueprints, and so the first half of the meeting, Aaron from Public Works just sort of led us through all the different steps, and I felt like that one was actually quite methodical, and we just sort of went bullet point by bullet point, and he sort of updated us. And what I thought was really, and there were some, actually, I think there were some quantitative metrics in there. We planted 45 trees and we did this and that. But it was mostly on the qualitative side. I think it was contextual, so that we could, it was sort of definitional. So it might say, land management. Well, then, they could basically define, what does that mean? In terms of what land and management means in Concord, and who owns what, and what is that? So I guess I felt like it was really that context, that qualitative part was really important, because unless it's somewhere buried, deeper down on the website or in the plan, some of that definitional stuff didn't seem to be in there that I think these conversations added a lot of color to, and I think we should put in our next plan. And then the second part of the conversation was with Delia and Jane and Joan from the Concord Land Trust. And Jane is, I think, relatively new. Joan is has been a trustee, I think, for many, many years and decades. Jane didn't even seem aware that these plans even existed. So to the point of sort of saying, you know, there's sort of a spectrum of awareness of the plans and the execution on it. I think it's good just sort of for information and knowledge raising. But we should talk about action and next steps, but I do think that they really did have, for me at least, because I hope they didn't feel like they were just educating us. I hope they were useful to the staff as well, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I think it was, and I think one of the things I remember from that conversation with Jane and Joan and Delia about forest management was, kind of reflecting on the plan and the plan sort of has this action that calls for a forest management plan. But in the conversation with them, it's like, okay, well, there's sort of municipal forests, there's town-owned conservation forests, and then there's privately owned forests. So it's like, are those three different management plans? Are those all one?
Like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
There's Harvard-owned forest.
Yeah.
There's Sudbury Valley Trustees.
Yeah, so
forest.
there's a number of different ownership. So to say in the plan that one thing that we should be doing is developing a forest management plan. It's like, well, that's like, what does that mean? And it's not spelled out in the climate action plan, or it doesn't really go beyond that in terms of detail. But I think that's something that I started to see pop up in these conversations too, is sort of matching the language in the plan with the reality of things, and going through the plan now as we are. It'd be good to keep that in mind about how do we rewrite some of these blueprints and goals and actions to sort of better reflect what these stakeholders are saying.
Right.
So.
It just seems we should be clarifying. I mean, I can imagine we can't do a forest plan for all these other organizations. All we can do is for the town.
Well, yeah,
We
we
could
can
request or ask for
we can-
support, but what
yeah.
we can really write in our committee.
Right.
So it sounds like we need clarity, more clarity.
I thought that was a really interesting meeting. It went on quite well. So developing a plan. So that's the kind of thing a consultant can come up with. Develop a forest management plan. But it doesn't have a meaning for the specific thing unless you get down with the people.
Mm-hmm.
So we should try to figure out for the next 5 years, what do we really want to do? Identifying the challenges. It was really interesting, and it's not part of the it's not part of this, but Joan from the Land Trust was really worried about the fact that, we have all these forests, lots of trees, but we don't have regeneration going on because we have too many deer eating the understory. And so that even though things are looking kind of nice and healthy and stuff, in fact, it might be that there is a real threat. Maybe over the next few decades that what we have out there stops, doesn't serve its purpose, doesn't either for biodiversity or for sequestration.
That is true.
And we also had a meeting with Ron and his group, the Minerva Action, which is a bunch of academic and engineering types that they really know their stuff.
Well, yeah, let me speak to that, Brad, if I could. We're happy you joined our group. We do have real tree experts, forest management experts on the group, Bill Muma and Bob Leverett. I'm just going to be a spokesman right now, but 'cause I'm still learning the tree people. We hug trees all the time, but they've been talking about using satellite data, which is available from the state as well as from the federal government, NASA, and measuring the degree of forestation over time. So getting it kind of going back maybe to 2020 and then saying what is it in 2025, and then using that as a metric for maybe saying what is the degree of forestation in 5 years from now as a way of measuring success or failure. So that's
Yeah.
that is quantitative. It's using satellite data. We're not going to measure species of trees or carbon, actually. I don't think.
Yeah.
But Bill and Bob are still working on figuring that out. We are
Yeah.
talking to some other towns in the area. We just had a conversation with Watertown this morning with our group, and they have the same issues trying to, and that's an urban tree environment, not as much as Concord is a suburban tree environment. And they have the same issues. How do you measure the trees in Watertown? And we're having conversations with some other towns because it's all how much you can sequester over time and how much is now stored in the bank. Because when you cut down 1,000 trees, you destroy the bank, and therefore no more interest accrues annually about how much carbon can be sequestered over the next 5 years. But using satellite data, we think it might be helpful for the town's resilience plan to have a metric of 2020, whatever the data would show, 2025 if you can get it, and then have a goal of not losing anything for sure by 5 years from now, and maybe preserving what you have and growing it a bit, despite the deer population, and maybe have that as part of the resilience plan. And maybe we can help you with that with my group, although I'm speaking for the group and I would have to get buy-in from the real tree people, Bill and Bob. But I can help out in that area.
Right.
So
Would
I
that
just-
be helpful?
Yeah, well, I just want to throw in that there's lots of different people with lots of different ideas. So I'm gonna forget John's name, but he was the one who devised the cleanup solution. Jerry, do you remember what that device was to clean up White Pond? And
APOD.
the APOD. And he in fact thinks that we have too many trees and that because of the warming of the climate and more pollen being delivered by these trees that are flowering earlier, that's what's really feeding the algae in the pond. And he thinks because there used to be more moose and things of that there was actually much more stratification and less big trees. So I'm throwing that out because different scientists, and he based that on a lot of the carbon data that he got from Walden Pond when they dug through, because it was all this talk about how the native people burnt there and then burnt things down because there's no soot in the sediment in Walden. So I throw that only because there's gonna be scientists
Right,
with
it's-
different attitudes about how you manage it and what's the best way to manage forests.
Right.
And I throw that in for what it's worth, because he thinks we need fewer trees around White Pond because of the pollen.
Now, in my impression, the pollen is coming from white pines.
Well, it might be, and it might be from
And
the
that
type
there
of
might be,
tree.
it might be that the mix of trees isn't
Could be.
right. We certainly.
But I'm just saying that there's
That's what-
lots of different angles is my only
Yeah.
point from the
No,
different
that's-
scientists with different,
That's a good
thoughts.
point.
And that's where deer come into play, because deer do not eat pines. So the hardwood trees that are there are replaced by pine trees.
Well, and he was
Yeah.
saying there were more moose and all these others, so it was a much more diverse, diverse group of organisms, feeding on the understory. Yeah.
But
Okay.
there's too much feeding on the understory
So
right
what-
now.
Well, there's not many deer by White Pond there. but-
So one
You'd
last
be
thing
surprised.
just so. We have a bunch of notes, I'm gonna serve them. On carbon sequestration, I did just a back of the envelope calculation on, we have 6,000, roughly 6,000 acres of permanently protected space. And some good fraction of that is forest. And the amount of carbon that gets sequestered by that is of order 1 ton of carbon per acre. That could be a little more, it could be less. It's not a very accurate, not a super accurate number. But it amounts to, when you turn it to CO2, which is a factor of 3.6 or something, the forest in Concord could sequester about 20,000 tons of
Hmm.
CO2 equivalent. Not like 10 times that much, not, much less than that, but it's of order half of what the remaining, if we do go down 85%, it's around half of the remaining emissions. So it's a significant amount, but it's not a huge amount. It's not like we can grow more trees and give up on
Emissions.
our energy goals.
Mhm.
Right, and then burn fossil fuels instead.
What'd you say?
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Brad. I think that's a good way to think about it, is we can't grow our way out of the problem and then start using fossil fuels because they're cheap right now. So I think it is good to have some kind of a measure. I don't know that that number is correct or not, but at least it's a starting point to refine it, perhaps.
Yeah, but I like so in thinking about forests, I like your point that we should set up a regular assessment of a analysis that can be done. Ideally, both in quantity of trees and in some measure of their health. That we can repeat every like 5 years-ish and see that things are staying the same. Or getting worse or getting better.
Right, right.
Uh,
I think the satellite data is currently available. We've of course been experimenting maybe with drones as a way to do a more low level traveling over the forested areas, but we are not ready to do that with our group yet. We are just experimenting with small parcels, perhaps, but we haven't really done much on that area. We're still looking into that.
okay.
But the satellite data apparently is available. And I think with some of the resources of Natural Resources Commission or others, they may have a good handle on the species and the health of the trees.
I think
Yeah.
Richard Foreman is probably a very good source of information on this. And I remember him giving a talk
Richard.
at the library. And he'd been up in a helicopter, looking down on various things in Concord. I mean, you know who Richard Foreman
Mhm.
is.
Yeah.
He comes to all the NRC,
Okay,
breakfast, coffee.
He's the
And he
he's a
was a
Harvard
Harvard
professor.
professor in ecology.
landscape
Thank
ecology.
you.
So,
Who's getting that?
I don't know.
Sorry, did I interrupt you?
I
That's
wanted
okay,
to
no
add
worries.
one piece of info for you, Ron. In meeting
Yeah.
with Dylan, she said that she had been approached by some Concord Academy students who wanted to do a project using drones to study the Concord environs. So she wasn't sure what she was gonna do about that, although she found it interesting and, stimulating. But I mentioned that to you because there may
Yeah.
be connection between what your team is doing and what these students want to do. Which,
What's the name of what's the contact there, Jerry?
I can get you contact. So some students had reached out to me, because I had met with the sustainability person over at Concord Academy. This is probably last year, so middle of last year in the fall. And I just met with him because he was new there, and he had some students who then reached out to me, and as Jerry suggested, they had come up with a project with using drones, and I think they were looking at wetland. Their proposal was to look at wetland areas using drones and look at changes over time of wetland fringes, and because they were looking at using sensors for vegetation, I think, on these drones. But I think they were seniors or are seniors, and I think their hope was to start a continuing project, that other students could continue like once they were gone. And so I put them in touch with Delia, and she had some conversations with them, but I I don't know exactly what had come of that, but I just had the same thought that Jerry did, which was, maybe there's some
Yeah.
potential to, engage with them on this project and their desire to use drones to look at vegetation and look at the landscape. So
Yeah,
Well, I'll tell you what, when I learned about Watertown is they've got a data set of 32 samples of trees that they've got in a certain like forested area. And so they have another way to measure on the ground the carbon sequestration in the 32 samples. And if we have a drone in Watertown, and this is all sort of a smaller area, not a whole, that's not Concord, that's a small area of Watertown. If we can get the 32 samples to measure on the ground and scale that up, and then a drone to measure at 400 feet above sea level, we can then, kind of match those two up and see how we are doing with the drone methodology.
Yeah.
Some actual data on the ground versus drone data from above. So it's all sort of experimental at this point, but at least we're kind of working on the problem. But that'd be helpful.
Can I ask one more question for Ron.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
No, go ahead. I'll follow after you.
Well, this is very experimental, but I understand that emerald ash borers, adults, can spot ash trees from the air by the color of the leaves, and that's how they find the trees that they are going to lay their eggs in. And it suggests that it might be possible from the air to distinguish species of trees by color. And I just wonder if any of the satellite data has whether that's been tried at all.
I really can't speak to that because the satellites are like 100 miles up, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't know whether, and also at that height, the canopy is sort of a
you
blur.
can tell. You
So
can tell the difference in the winter.
yeah, you can, but then there's no leaves to tell the
Except the
color.
pines, and it would be
Except the
interesting to
pines.
know the change in the proportion of white pines.
Yeah, we're struggling with this ourselves. So I
Well,
appreciate
just throwing it out.
your feedback on that. Yeah, I think there's potential, and of course, artificial intelligence is a wonderful way to try to match the data from a drone with hard data that's collected on the ground, and try to measure it that way. I have just one more small report on our Minerva group. We're going into Concord Carlisle High School on Friday this week. Compliments of Matt Goldberg, the head teacher of AP Science. And we're going to do the photovoltaics in toy trucks and teach the kids about electricity and thin film solar and batteries and voltage and current and power. I don't know what we're going to do, but it'll be with the students in 3 or 4 sections. And then in March, we've been invited in to do a microplastics and water experiment, which is identifying how you can find the microplastics in your bottles of water. So that's just a quick report on our stuff, with the high school. And thanks to Catherine and Priscilla for helping us to get set up there.
Okay.
I'm really excited about that's happening. It's great. And if there's any, and I can connect with Priscilla and Matt on this, but if there's any way of sharing that's happening beyond this circle or feedback, I don't know if there's surveys or feedback from the students, I think that would be really powerful. But
yeah, I don't do social media, but I'm happy to have someone else do that.
No, the Concord Bridge, the
Concord Bridge,
yeah, the Concord Bridge to publish something on what you're doing.
yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
So,
I was just going to ask, I know we need to move on, but I've been thinking about this idea of what other towns are doing. And, obviously our forests are different. It's an urban environment versus a suburban and all of that. But I do think looking at these different plans to sort of look at the different metrics and just sort of how they're approaching a forest management plan, or I think we should sort of think about it as land management, right, too, because I think you mentioned wetlands. It's not just the trees, but it's sort of how these ecosystems interact. do we, I know I've actually have the Somerville's plan and I met someone who has that and sent me.
Mm.
Are you able to share those, or is there a way of gathering information on these plans, or has that been done in the past when I wasn't here for the 2020 plan when the consultant and this group drafted it, but was there any talking with other towns or seeing what kinds of goals and metrics were being used with respect to land management?
I don't know.
And not that I remember.
I,
That doesn't mean a whole lot.
I imagine they compared, I imagine the, you know, towns in the region compare notes just because people are so interested in it, but I don't know.
One thing that I recall was that at that time, the one thing that I recall
Yeah.
was that at that time, a number of communities were rushing to get their climate action plan in place because there was funding available.
Right,
And so I think a number of the plans, I don't know this firsthand, but my impression is a number of the plans kind of sort of came out looking similar. Because it was kind of the same consultants
right.
who were doing the various plans. That's not a negative statement. It's just, you know, I'm commenting on that
Yeah,
to indicate that that was ancient history, you know? It's, I think things have changed quite a bit by this point. So, meaning, I don't know how much discussion went on with other towns at that time.
No,
There wasn't much to talk about.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
consultants are useful, and I think Kim Lundgren is who we use. I think Somerville used the same one. So to your point, you know, they probably look the same because there weren't that many people, you know, professionals that really knew what they were doing in this space. And so on the one hand, that's great, right? Because then you can kind of compare apples to apples and see what other towns are doing and seeing how we compare. On the other hand, you know, it does beg the question of, you know, we've evolved, the climate's evolved. Maybe we should be, you know, looking to Ron's group and other people to think about, you know, satellite imagery and other metrics to think about how we should be thinking about this in the future and how we should be benchmarking and monitoring progress.
Yeah. So your comment makes me realize that we should. And I think there might be a database or at least some collection of climate action plans from different towns. We should be taking a look at that. Why don't we should go on to what you guys did and any other learnings from Jerry and his group that are, you know, you were Brad and
Brad
Janet were
and
on.
I met. Brad wrote up a wonderful
Right.
report and he's gonna talk about it.
Yeah, what level of detail do you want us to just read through
The high
our,
points.
yeah. So, one thing to note is that on landscaping, the relevant indicator of success is a reduction of water use. We have a 2030 target of 65 gallons per day per capita. We've hit that target already based on the 4-year average. But
Meaning we've reduced it?
the 4-year rolling average has been reduced below the target that we set. The baseline in 2020 was 66.5 gallons per day per capita. The 2030 target was 65, so reduce it by 1.5 per person per day. And we've more than done that. The current average from the last available data set from DEP, which measures through 2023, is that our 4-year rolling average is down to 63.75. So we've hit our goal on on the identified indicator of success. But in looking at the data set, there's a lot of noise in the data set. And I would also say, like, editorially, it's pretty hard to suss out that things that we've done on landscaping in town are responsible for water reduction.
Yeah.
The data are very noisy. It's got an extremely high standard deviation of something like 8% of the values. this might not actually be the best indicator of success, and or we
Right.
might wanna be using other ones alongside it. So one of the things that we found looking at this is really, we might wanna reopen whether that's an appropriate indicator of success on our progress for landscape, or at natural resources in general.
This just is for people who get town water as opposed to, well waters
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and,
so that,
And of course, it, you know, the landscaping is very dependent on whether it's a, you know, rainy spring, rainy summer, or whether
Yeah,
it's, whether it's very dry.
totally.
Um,
And it's dominated by, automatic sprinkler systems? Maybe-
Online, they say it is. I don't know if that's true, but online, when you look online, they say that's where the vast majority of.
That's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't, our analysis did not go that deep,
Yeah,
to try to look at that. We were more geared toward the implementation steps that are outlined in the plan.
okay.
I'd like to add something to your comment there. Talking to Melissa on this subject was very interesting. She also commented on, you know, by that metric, we're doing okay. But that doesn't include farms. It doesn't include golf courses. Would you care to venture a guess how much water a golf course uses?
horrifying.
How much water a golf course uses?
100,000 gallons a day.
Yeah,
Tracks.
So to Brad's point, this may not be
yeah,
an appropriate, given the scale of things, this residential usage per day may not be such a big factor for us.
Given how much farming and golf courses we
Yeah.
have in town, 2 golf courses and lots of farmland, yeah.
Now, the wells are different.
Yeah,
She
so you
talked
got- yeah,
about-
you also think about the sources of water, so which is something at least I learned some of the stuff in our conversation with Melissa too, which is, you know, the farms have their own wells. And depending on where those wells tap, like if they're bedrock, that's different than sort of the sand and softer stuff where a lot of the municipal supply is coming from
Coming
for
from,
drinking
yeah.
water, so
Yeah.
there could be so just drilling a well doesn't mean you're always tapping into the same aquifer. Or the same direct water source as you are from like the public supply, but yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah,
complicating
because that,
factors around
the White
that,
Pond
which is
pumping well, we're
interesting.
concerned about the pumping for the farm, yeah.
so,
Anyway, just some comment in support of what Brad was talking about and suggesting.
I hadn't realized that it was such a, the metric of success, in terms of, I mean, there's a lot of aspects to sustainable landscaping and, you know, leaving leaves and, doing, you know, pesticide free and things like that. So the water is pretty much the main focus.
It's what's in the plan, yeah.
Okay,
So, looking to the 7 implementation steps under landscaping. And these are also just enumerated in the plan. Develop and execute a communications plan to promote Concord's sustainable landscaping handbook. So, this was largely accomplished. A theme on all 7 of these implementation steps is that there was a flurry of activity in sort of 2019, 2020, 2021, which was the
yeah,
timeframe for doing these things. And then there hasn't been follow-on since. So we've got the beautiful landscaping handbook. It was made available. Janet and I spent meeting time going through that handbook cover to cover. It's 6 years old, hasn't been updated online since. We've identified about a page worth of edits that really ought to happen. Additionally, the online resources that kind of flowed from this and that erstwhile sustainability directors curated are also pretty old. And we developed a lot of suggestions for updates on the website and some things maybe to be either taken down or re-envisioned. So, you know, did we do it? Yes. Is
Yeah.
it ongoing? No. And it really sorely needs updating, so we've got those
Good.
issues in hand, and with everybody's approbation, I think would like to just give
Just
it
get
to
it done.
Eric and let's get it done. Number two, develop a list of best management practices and programs for landscape, nursery, garden center retailers. Align with landscaping goals, incorporate guidance framework into subdivision rules and regulations. There was a listening session. Let's actually group this with the one next underneath it, survey area landscaping garden providers about sustainable practices and create ongoing mechanism for businesses to report. So this was done. In advance of having a three-part seminar series. We surveyed landscapers, we've identified best management practices, we put together these beautiful presentations. They're still up on the town website. Each one of the videos is an hour and a half long. It's chock full of all the information you could ever want.
Right,
And each one of those videos has less than 100 views in the
right. No, that's
6
good.
years.
I just did one.
Yeah. Yeah, I did one too. It's still under 100. So we haven't done a good job of ensuring that people are actually connected to the materials that are available and having leveraged all of that survey work that we did to inform people. In terms of aligning bylaws and regulations, we haven't done it. The water use restriction bylaw was last updated in 2002. The wetlands bylaw was last updated in 2013. We don't have a town bylaw on landscaping. Closest thing you would find would be within the zoning bylaw landscape setback restrictions. There's nothing in terms of best practices anywhere. And really the only action in this space on getting people to do sustainable landscaping was the citizen petition to get rid of leaf blowers, which great. But that's not really, we haven't tried to tackle that in any meaningful way, nor have we seen in evidence from our canvassing, although this is an outstanding question that we might ask Public Works about, that there's any kind of dialogue with retailers in town. So if we want to consider that complete, you know, there would actually be ongoing curated dialogue and an open channel of communication with retailers. Moving on to our fourth, develop incentive-based program for town residential, commercial, sustainable landscaping, explore incentives for electric lawn care equipment. So this was done. We can see in evidence just on the town website. People looked into this in 2019. We do have an active electric lawnmower rebate program that was funded by a town resident.
Yeah.
The town resources online do not connect to the many mass save programs for mass save rebates for other lawn equipment, including a mass save lawnmower rebate.
Would we be eligible for those, Janique?
Sure.
If you're a gas customer.
If you,
If you're a gas customer.
But you also have to, you can't replace an electric with an electric.
No, but yeah,
So if you have a
it needs
real
to
old
be
electric that you had long ago that's died, you still have, you don't get it.
my 20-year-old lawnmower, if I replace it, I get the rebate, right?
Yeah,
So this was clearly done, you know, check mark on the rubric on the, but it needs to be updated because there's
Right.
stuff that people are probably missing. Next one on our list is establish a tool share and seed exchange facility in an accessible location. So Fowler's been doing seed exchange since 2013, as we talked about at the last meeting.
yeah,
There has been work, which I'll talk about under our next bullet, to ramp that up and do more education of members of the public. In terms of tool exchange, Concord doesn't do tool share. If you've got a library card, you're connected to the Minuteman Library Network, and there are other libraries of things in other towns. So theoretically, anybody with a library card could be engaged in tool share, but under the criteria, the step that
Yeah.
we established, we haven't done the half of this step, so half done. Develop ongoing training and education program for landscapers and residents. Fowler's been doing a great job on this.
Yeah.
They've ramped up the seed exchange. They've included, as of 2022, native seeds, which is wonderful. There is ongoing programming that's happening kind of organically at Fowler. We may want to be engaging Fowler, the trainer, that Isabel Bailey, who's done some of the trainings, and also Bowler Engineering, who were the people that did the
Yeah,
sustainability, the seminar series, to kind of promote and expand into a more durable, landscaping focused, educational series instead of kind of a one-off thing, or, you know, whenever Isabel's
right.
got something cool to do at Fowler, but actually trying intentionally to keep it going. And, you know, thinking about the sustainability fair, and making that an annual event, thinking about other events where there might be a Nexus Earth Day event,
yeah,
agricultural fair. There are opportunities, obvious opportunities for expansion we're not really
Yeah.
doing. And then the last one under our section is develop and update outreach mechanism to connect residents with information about businesses using sustainable practices and resources. So there are developed mechanisms to do it, and we really aren't leveraging them in a focused or intentional way. So we've got a bunch. The library newsletter will tell people about the educational programming, but it's not specialized in this space. We used to have a garden blog. Hasn't been updated in 4 years. We've got things like the bridge, the ability to do a sustainability newsletter,
Okay.
potentially out of this committee, a library newsletter, area business marketing, town social media accounts, the website, plenty of places where we could be doing stuff in this. We're not really utilizing them.
Good.
So in all of these, like on landscaping, we've checked the box on all of them, and there's a lot more work that needs to happen, and a couple of outstanding questions that we identified. So that's where we were on ours. It's why we didn't really need to meet with anybody. We really only had a couple of outstanding questions.
right.
But it's clear from doing the exercise that we've got to keep it going.
Yeah, and
Updating, yeah.
this
Yeah, we'll
is,
update
the whole climate action plan seems like, okay, these are the things for, you know, we do this all in the next 5 years and we're done. And in fact, no, it's not as simple as that. Whether you need to do something every year or just, you know, periodically, whatever, so you do something to the most extent that we can, yeah.
Can you share that so I can just attach it to the minutes?
Yes.
Yeah,
Because it would be easier than me trying to summarize what you did.
Yeah, I'll forward it to you.
yeah, no,
Okay, that's good.
the minutes can have attachments, which is
Yeah, I know.
nice.
That was a quick report.
Oh, I was
Yes.
just gonna say, that was a great report, and I'm realizing, we didn't sort of methodically go through in the same way from our conversation, but I do have sort of there are more notes now than a report, but sort of sketch through what, because as we went through each implementation plan, we don't have time in this meeting to do that, but I do think it's useful for each of these little sub teams to report out, because there's a lot of useful updates. And I'm wondering, just from sort of next steps, I mean, if it makes sense to, I think the idea was to move on to another topic,
Yeah.
but I'm wondering if this requires another agenda, a meeting to report out, because I do think that there's more we could say about our meeting and next steps, and maybe that requires some additional conversation, but I thought that was really great. And I would just say from an anecdotal place, listening to the landscaping, there was a lot of sort of momentum and energy and money, as there does seem to be across the plan, around incentives around decarbonization on sort of energy, electricity, you know, lawnmowers, et cetera, and less incentive, both financial and otherwise, for natural based solutions. I have a neighbor who really wants to do great native planting and feels stymied, but both by what she's allowed to do from a wetlands perspective, the town perspective, and a cost perspective. So that's, you know, that's for a larger conversation, but I do think when we think about the plan and our incentives and our communication and what we kind of encourage homeowners and residents and businesses to do, we sort of should think holistically about where we're placing emphasis and where our
Yeah.
incentive structures lay.
Does the pollinator group, I'm not particularly familiar with them, like, are they a resource for people who like say, oh, I want to do, you know, more native landscaping, like, are they a resource they can go to and they can help them out, like help them with planning or anything,
That's a
or?
good question. I think Isabel Bailey is on that committee,
Yeah,
and I know Janet Rothrock is.
Right.
But
Good.
we actually did not.
I mean, it's interesting,
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's the
Think of
seed
that, because
exchange and, you know, things like that, but, you know, it almost makes me think of, you know, CMLP as energy coaches, like, could there be sort of like native landscaping coaches or volunteers who could, you know,
Isabel has done these
but,
winter native seed planting
Yeah.
workshops at Verrill Farm.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Verrill's got all the land, conservation land and dirt most of the summer, which is not very carbon sequestration.
No,
Maybe it should be
it's
more
not,
like a-
No,
that's true.
right, so, you
And
know,
they,
that's,
and they're not pesticide free either.
huh?
They're not, Verrill Farm is not pesticide.
Oh,
free.
absolutely not, absolutely, or herbicide free, and that conservation land that's leased to him by the town is bare all summer long. Because
Eric-
it saves-
Eric, Yeah, and I like your point, because I guess that was sort of my point too, is we pay, the CMLP pays, you know, they've got money because they're sort of, even though they're town owned, they're sort of a for-profit model, they could, but the coaches are paid to help residents and incentivize them. We have, you know, Green Thumbs, we have the Pollinary, we have all these little groups of volunteers and sort of really like-minded, great people in town. But it's sort of scattershot and there's no sort of, from my, and I could be wrong, but sort of centralized way for residents to kind of both be incentivized and gain support or knowledge from that. I'm wondering if there's a way where we could have some sort of coaching, you know, in the next action plan.
This is a forum that we should be doing through Nextdoor or through some web tool where people could ask questions and people could, you know, our local experts could post and motivate them.
Well, Framingham, what is it, it's changed its name, now it's called the Wild Seed, the place in Framingham that has all the native seeds and
Are you
plants.
talking about the?
Garden in the Woods.
It's Garden in the
Native
Woods, but it
Plant-
has a
Native
native,
Plant
it's
Trust.
Native Plant Trust. I mean, anybody can go there. They've got tons of experts, tons of time,
Yeah.
tons of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
publications. And there's an organization in Belmont that does the same. I mean, there's tons of organizations if people really wanna. Are
But
really
but it's-
interested in doing.
yeah, I guess I'm wondering like what, I'm not familiar with what they offer. Like, I guess I'm thinking, I mean, you know, I guess there's organizations where you say like, oh, I got a shady spot in my yard, what could grow here? And they'd be like, they could probably recommend some native plants. But I'm thinking like more of somebody like a coach who could fundamentally help people who say like, I'd love to make my property more sustainable, you know, have less grass, more native plantings, make it more
Yeah.
sustainable, and somebody could actually help them develop a plan for their property.
That we would pay, that the town would pay for?
Well, I'm picturing this as like a volunteer type thing, which, you know, may be tough, but like only, and I say that only because I don't know where money would come from
Oh,
unless
exactly,
we,
that's my
unless we found
point. I
grant
just think that
support,
it would be, I think
but.
that's not.
If we're talking outside of a town incentive structure, if you're paying for your landscaping out of pocket, probably the contractor that you are hiring to do your gardening is going to do that for you. So like a piece of the answer to this question, and Catherine, you should make sure that your neighbor knows that this resource exists, is to start with the landscaping handbook, which has sections on
Yeah.
native planting and the benefits of it. And it lists in it, some places where you can go to learn more about organic plantings. And then if you go with, a contractor that specializes in organic plantings, and I did this on my property when we were planting. I mean, they have a market-based interest to do the coaching
Right.
with you and to walk your yard and say, this is what could go here, this is what could go there, what do you think about this? And show you pictures and talk you through some of that. So you know, if we want to open a conversation about having a town-based resource or town incentive structures, that's another
Yeah.
thing. But, you know, if this is you doing your yard, a lot of the times the market is providing that already.
Well,
So
the
your
market-
neighbor should look at that handbook if they
Yeah,
haven't
so
already.
this is, I mean, this is a particular issue where they're close to a wetland and it's illegal for them to remove the bramble essentially, unless they go and hand pick one by, it basically would cost them $10,000 to remove this bramble, and they want to do it to actually plant more native plants because the bramble's actually choking out the native plants. So they're trying to do the right thing with respect to the environment, but it's going to cost them $5,000 to $10,000 because they're not allowed by law to do certain things. So it's a little bit nuanced, but I guess the point is that, you know, if there was a coach or somebody who could actually sort of case by case, because I hear you, but we've had landscapers who know native plants, but they also mow to death and don't practice
Yeah.
sustainable landscaping. So I would caution, you know, and then we don't want to get in the business of saying, well, these landscapers are native plant and sort of landscape friendly, and these landscapers are not, you know, we can't get into that business. So it's really tricky and it's really nuanced. But I think, you know, the heat pump coach is just kind of an interesting model because you're talking about, there's so much, you know, I have a 150-year-old farmhouse, I have different insulation, et cetera. There's all these sort of context specific things when you're talking about residences and businesses, because each plot is different. So anyway, it's just an idea. I agree there's no money for it, but I do think we should be thinking about the disincentives, right? The neighbor who really wants to do well by the environment and is being dissuaded by sort of, you know, archaic laws and also the cost of certain things. So, and no really incentive to do it.
I want to do a time check, because we have 10
just wanna
minutes
say
before
one more
9, and we
thing.
want
And
to
I
get
just
through.
closed my minutes.
Huh?
I just closed my minutes.
I mean, you mentioned the place at Belmont, which is Grow Native Massachusetts.
Yeah.
They have regular talks.
Yeah, all of these
Um,
places do.
Which,
Or courses.
I mean, some of them are in person, some of them on Zoom. So to
There's
have a
lots
link,
of
I mean,
resources.
you know, to have a link to that outfit, just,
Yeah,
you know, I just found the page.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of good
They have
information.
sales, they have
I mean,
sales in the
the-
spring and
Right.
they have all sorts of
The garden
options.
and the woods, I mean, that they, you know, you can sign up for little courses there, but it's. I think this is probably more useful.
Well, but you can certainly go there and have conversations. I've got conversations. I show them pictures of things. They tell me whether it's native or not. And you just have to find some
Yeah.
time when
Oh,
they're
yeah,
able
yeah,
to do that.
yeah.
They're very willing to share
Mhm.
their thoughts.
well, let's think about what town resources to connect people to people that can help.
Mhm.
Because I think most of the landscaping companies in my neighborhood are called Extreme Landscaping, Perfection Landscaping, and these are not your friends.
Mow and blow,
What?
mow and blow landscapers, because that's all they do.
So, Jared, did you want to say anything more about, your work?
No,
or
because
should
I
we-
don't want to follow him.
Yeah.
In the interest of time, maybe we should just have everything centralized to the minutes.
Yes, I think we should, attach stuff to the minutes. Write up what you can about what you've learned, and we should clean it up and attach it to the minutes, share it with each other. What should we do in the next month?
Get names of
You know, we
people who
could
are
keep-
interested in doing the greenhouse tours.
What,
The greenhouse
Oh,
tours. We need
greenhouse
names-
tours, yeah,
we need
right.
Names of
Mhm.
people.
we need
And,
to,
and the
That has to happen.
sustainability fair, we need to start thinking about.
Right.
I'm sorry,
So
were you
let's talk
asking
about those
about the
two things.
plan?
I was
review?
talking about the climate action plan, what we want to do next,
Oh,
but, let's talk a couple minutes about that. We could sort of continue and try to wrap up on this section that we've been working on, or we can, and then next month, open up on a different section. Does that sound like a well-spent time? I mean, I don't,
Say the first part again.
well, how can we need to get some closure, or at least be able to say, okay, we did something on this section, here it is, here's our work. And move on to the next section. Or we could leave some, we could have somebody be a champion of natural resources section and try to weave it all together and figure out. I don't know the
Kind of
right way
depends
to
on
do
what
this.
we
Brad,
want
were
to do.
there, I have a question. Were there, I thought there were 5 sort of teams or sub-teams. I know we took 2, or maybe there was 4 and we took 2 of the 5. Is that, I'm just wondering if everyone reported out. I know
Right.
I know we had a lot more to report out tonight than I actually reported.
Right.
But I just want to make sure that we're not missing any one or subcommittee.
Well, Paul's not here. Now, Jerry and Paul worked on 2 different sections.
Right.
Okay, so they had 2 as well. Okay. All right. So that's the 5 there. Okay. I guess I would vote for, we can leave some things hanging, but I would vote for sort of wrapping it up in that. I think that, Brad Dye had a really great sort of methodical report out. I have a lot of notes. I didn't sort of do the same thing, but there's a lot of content there that I didn't share tonight that I could just attach to the minutes, but I wonder if it makes sense to do it in some sort of, like we talked about the template, but some sort of way where we can, I don't know if it's a spreadsheet, or rather than sort of send each other notes, or I don't know what the protocol is in terms of sending each other notes, if we can even do that. But I don't think it should be lost, I guess is my point, and before we move on to the next section.
I think only Brad should be attached to the minutes. And we should clean ours up. And Jerry and Paul can clean some stuff up and really. I think we have a lot of questions and ideas. Not necessarily all fully formed as to what we should do next.
Mhm.
So let's work on it some this month. But also talk next about green home tours and a landscaping fair, climate fair. Or, as to whether we wanna, whether
Well, I
we
think-
wanna do
I
those.
mean, it included some landscaping in the climate fair.
Those
I
are
mean, it
different.
can have, a broad spectrum
Yes,
fair, as really Mothers Up Front put together last year,
yes.
which had a wide spectrum.
Does anybody know if there's been more discussion, either in Mothers Out Front or in other groups, about having a climate fair this year?
I don't think so. I think, after Laura left the town, Mothers Out Front sort of almost fell apart. And I know they're sort
Well-
of reinstating themselves.
Yeah, I
So-
think that they're just focused really on transportation. There's been a lot of work around this transportation study, and there's a transportation sort of subcommittee of Mothers Out Front that's meeting and that's very active, and they're really pushing towards working with the TAC, the Transportation Advisory Committee. I was
good.
actually gonna say, I know we don't have time to assign new subgroups and go on to the next thing, but could we at least decide on what the next pillar of the plan is that we're going to tackle after natural resources? And I was going to suggest, given the sort of momentum around transportation with Mothers Out Front, that maybe, is transportation one of them? Am I making that up? I think it is. Or mobility?
Mobility.
Mobility.
I was
I'm-
gonna say-
I'm with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care. We could do it later, but we do have some momentum here. So even if we carry the natural resources into the February meeting, I do think just so that in the background, while we have conversations with people in town or start thinking about it, I think we should just at least choose the next topic, even if it doesn't
Okay.
start until March.
And you proposed transportation.
I'm just doing that just because there's a lot of momentum and a lot of like kind of
Mhm.
motivation with Mothers Out Front to tackle some transportation challenges. So I just thought, since they're talking about it, it might be a
Yeah.
time to strike while the iron's hot. But I'm open. You know, we could do it later too. It's not like there's anything pressing really on that front.
I'm up for that. I think that's a good idea. I've been looking at the agenda for the Transportation Advisory Committee, and there's not enough there that they're gonna talk about that makes me want to attend any of the meetings.
Yeah, I would
But-
attend some, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
But maybe they don't go by the agenda, but, so,
It's required by law.
I think that-
Yeah,
think
I don't think there's, I mean, Linda, I mean, you know, Laura left town, she left Mothers Up Front. She was also, I think, either the chair or a really vibrant participant in the Transportation Advisory Committee. So I think there's
Yeah.
kind of a vacuum there.
okay,
Yeah, I agree. You know, and I don't know how much can be
okay.
done, quite frankly. So as I said, I defer. If there's something else from the committee that seems more pressing, I'm happy to, you know, I just brought that up because I wanted to let you know about Mothers Up Front, what they're doing.
I support your, idea.
Mhm.
Let's wrap this up a little bit. Cheryl has been working on the green home tours. And we had a discussion the other day about homes to participate in, and I've thought of lots of homes, you know, I think there's gonna be no shortage.
Okay.
That's good.
But tell us
Reach out
what
to-
you, what,
Well, no, I mean, they, CMLP had reached out and said they were interested in it, right? I assume that means it was successful for them. I don't know.
yeah,
I'm assuming that, and they're ready. They have their EV and coaches ready to do it in March. On
So-
Saturday, 2 Saturdays in March. We have no date set per se, because I wanted to
Okay.
hear from the homeowners. So far, we have one potential, Sharon Jones, who used to be on
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
committee, who has the geothermal. She's a relatively small house, so I think that's going to be a small party, and we have the two people that Jan said he identified have not indicated or are not ready
okay.
to participate. So far I have one home.
And so, but I would think maybe a home from Mill Run or Riverwalk could be a home.
Yeah, I think Mill Run would be better because it's so much newer.
Yeah, maybe Mill Run home. That's a West Concord, it's not a retrofit situation, you know, those homes are built to be, net zero.
Mhm.
Are they built to be net zero or net zero?
Well,
kind of
net
mostly?
zero, potential, I mean, you have to put
Yeah.
solar panels on to be net zero. But
Right,
most homes in Riverwalk do, and I actually calculated my energy use. And it was pretty close to net zero. I calculated 1 year. I haven't done it recently.
okay.
How many homes did we have
So,
in the
what,
spring?
We had 6, right? 3 on each Saturday?
Yeah.
3 on 2 different dates.
when's the next discussion with Jan? Jan?
Whenever I reach out to her.
Okay.
I think the next key is we have to get the names of the names of people, see what their availability is, find out what Saturdays, and then let her know, and then
Okay,
I think to me, that's from my
So-
recollection of what we did last time.
that's the gating item. Let me,
Do we have
We
to
have
have all new
10.
homeowners or could there be some repeats? I'm just thinking about if this is in March with advertising and making sure we have dates and things. It's already almost February. I worry that we're running up, you said March, right? Saturdays in March?
yeah, we'll run short of time unless we get it figured out in the next week or so.
Yeah, I just
Um,
think, you know,
He's agreed
not
to
everyone
do it.
went to the last one, so I don't think it hurts to have repeat if homeowners are willing to have repeat. source.
But the problem with Mill Run is there's really nowhere to park.
Parking's a problem, huh?
Yes.
Maybe we shouldn't do Mill Run. Okay,
I
let me,
think refits, I think retrofits are, not that we have to have brand new, everybody's done it, but retrofits are, I think, what more people
Most people are interested.
are interested
I
in.
think so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you say Jan had suggested?
She gave me two names of people who,
Okay.
one's on Central, and she said she'd great to do it next time, but she's not finished with everything.
Okay,
And then the other person never responded to me,
well,
so,
and I'm assuming she
Yeah.
probably got those names from the energy coaches.
yes. Yeah,
Okay.
they're people who are using, and she did say that Kim would be willing to do it again, so, and he's always good because
Yeah.
he's, I mean, so I've not been to his house, but I assume.
Yeah, because obviously Jan and the energy coaches would know who, has had retrofits and good ones and.
Exactly.
I haven't gotten around to contacting my friends, I would just wanna think about it, but I can contact some people tomorrow. And get a couple houses, I think.
Yeah.
And then we should meet and. Start.
Yeah.
Getting
Yeah.
get the material together.
Unfortunately, we have
I could ask one person, I don't
So-
think I know anybody else who's had a retrofit.
Who?
I could ask one person, Janet Rothrock is, I'm thinking of,
Yeah, she was one on my list.
on your list. Okay, I'll leave it to you.
Um. She may be nervous about it, but I'll ask her. I'm gonna ask a friend in West Concord and another homeowner, Concord Center. See if they can do it. And I think we'll get some.
Okay.
So,
Probably too late to wait until the next,
Say that again?
it's probably too late to the next conservation and climate coffee to
no, I think we just gotta
post
get
it
them.
there, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Well,
So, I think
yeah, I
that
was gonna say, that's next week. I'm actually gonna miss it, but it's just this coming Tuesday is the next coffee, so. It
It's
would-
February 4th, right? Yeah, next week.
yeah, so that's just a week from.
The NRC.
Yeah, geez, that's right. I was thinking it was 2 weeks from.
Yeah, no, it's a week from tomorrow. I also, just before we move, I don't know if you saw Linda Ferrari was on the call. I know her, our kids are the same age. She is just, in case she didn't come, she's the liaison to the Climate Action Committee for the West Concord Advisory Committee. So I don't know if that means she'll just pop on to meetings in the future. She didn't seem to have any public comment, but I just want to let you know. I don't know if you saw that she was on.
Trying to make any public comments.
Did you
okay.
see that, Cheryl, that she was on there? Linda Ferrari.
I wrote her down, Linda
Okay.
Ferrari, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will just, a side note, I don't know if you read the Bridge, but her husband is Wilson Kerr, who every month writes a very great outdoors article and all about nature. And I was actually going to ask her about some of the things that came up around trees and too many trees and not enough and the deer population, because he's a naturalist and knows a lot about all of this. And in fact, they have a place on the vineyard and it's becoming, they're extending deer season until January because it's so rampant there and it's destroying the forest. So anyway, just a side note about context for Linda. So she may join us in the future.
Right. Okay, so beyond the green home tours, we're gonna make some progress there. What's the appetite of the committee to get involved in a fair type of thing? Now, if we had enough support from other groups.
I think. I mean, I'm willing to reach out to Mothers Out Front and Concord Can and
Yeah.
CMLP. I think if we can do it, we should do it.
I don't think we should do it in April, though.
No, do it, no.
I think
No, not in
like
April.
May or September or something.
Yeah. That's a
Um,
good point. Could be
so
September.
There's too much happening April.
Yes.
It's badly timed.
Yeah, but there's gonna be a million visitors in April.
Would we want to think about doing it in the same location as last time at the high school?
Well, the high school was by accident, although
Well,
it did
yeah, I mean,
work
that
out
was-
well.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't the original intent, but it was gonna be at the library outdoors, but,
Yeah. And the library lawn is good because you get people who, aren't planning to come, but they go to the library and they come. Whereas
Yeah.
if you have it at the high school, you get people who know about it and who are coming.
Yeah, I think the library would be, it was a good one.
Mhm.
Maybe we should talk to the umbrella. Cause they have they have their Muscataquid Earth Day, which probably also runs right up against the 250th and stuff like that. I wonder if they'd have any appetite for doing something in May. Rather than April,
Mhm.
and then they could. It's a big planning effort until it's shared by a few and energetic people, then it's. Becomes a manageable planning effort.
Yeah,
Okay, but, that's pretty much what we were gonna do. I didn't update I'm
I think we're running out of time, or we ran out of time.
I think we're out of time. It's a long day. Okay. Should we,
I will make a motion to adjourn.